Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the New Animal Podcast. My name, as always, is Colin Bemis. I got to stop starting episodes that way. But I am, in fact, Colin Bemis. Today, we have an unbelievable performer on the show that I've wanted to have on the show for quite some time. She has a laundry list of IMDb credits and has done a lot of wonderful work, including a movie that I'm a huge fan of that I can't wait to chat about, which is Rent-A-Pal from just a couple of years ago, put out by IFC. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Amy Rutledge is on the show.
Hi.
Amy.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
The pleasure is ours. Thank you for being on the show, and thank you for being amenable, like I said, off air, to my postponing.
Yes, I'm honored. I am grateful.
You're too
Happy to be
kind.
here.
We're happy to have you. So the first question that I always ask is, was there an initial film or filmmaker or performance or genre that really grabbed you at an early age that kind of made you obsessed with film?
Yeah, definitely 80s. I'm going to show my age. 80s sci-fi, like magical adventure type films. So The Labyrinth, Dark Crystal, Never-Ending Story, Beetlejuice, all these really wonderful Goonies. Oh my God. I remember watching them as a kid, like over and over and over again. I've watched them so many times, all of them, and just being so just like drawn in and so excited and just instill with a sense of like of just magic and like I wanted to be a part of that. Like I wanted to be in those films, and so I was pretty young. I was very, very, very young. It's like 3 or 4, I feel
Yeah.
like, when I first started watching these types of films. Um and yeah, I think, yeah. Yeah, the 80s magical fantasy films. And I feel like one day I need to make a film like that. Like whether as a filmmaker or like as an actor, like that's what I'm drawn to. Still,
Yeah,
after all these years.
I
I
love
have a
it.
cat here. Sorry. Get out of here.
They're welcome.
Okay,
Um,
cool.
yeah, it's funny. I feel like lots of films are made for kids and tailored to kids to a degree, but I feel like the 80s were a very special sweet spot of mixing. I don't know, I think there was a certain approach to having kids be able to handle slightly adult themes, like kind of preparing
Totally.
them for it that you don't necessarily see now. Yeah, like Neverending Story, and like I don't know, there were so many. Yeah,
I
it was a
agree.
sweet time for 80s fantasy.
Oh man, I'm like they don't make them like that anymore.
You
Unless
really
they do,
don't.
and I just don't know about them.
Yeah, I know.
Funny
I do
things.
that all the time too. I'm like, do I just not know about them? Again,
Yeah.
I know there's really great films tailored for kids, but that was a
Yeah.
magical time.
Or like even like, did you ever see Return to Oz?
Oh yeah,
It was so dark and like
that was
creepy and
so
like
dark,
traumatizing too, to see as a kid was just like taking off the heads. It was so those like wheelie monkey monster things. Do you remember
terrifying.
that?
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
but like amazing.
Yeah.
Like I can't believe the stuff we watched like as kids and like seeing what they have out now, right? It's like I'm gonna do it. Maybe
You
we should do
should.
it together.
You should. It's a good no, I like it. It's a good goal.
Yeah.
So did you go to school? I talk a lot about education,
Mhm.
whether it's for acting or what or film school proper, so on and so forth, because I think especially now there's so much access to technology and also access and resources to learning about film. Did you go to film school or school for acting? And then what did you get out of it if you did?
Yeah, so I went to University of Rhode Island for as my acting major and minor in
Okay.
communications. And I feel really bad because once I got there, I was just like, I hate this. Like I was so depressed. Like I was just like, I want to be like I didn't take advantage. And now looking back and having all the training that I have now, I realized what an actual good film program or excuse me, acting program, theater program they had. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
wow, like I didn't realize what I had, They like we really had a great program, which you wouldn't think like University of Rhode Island would have like an amazing theater program, but like it really was. And
Yeah.
I went for a year and a half and I was like, I'm dropping out and I'm going to New York and I'm going to be an actor. Like, I don't need school. Like, I had like such like this like viewpoint on it. And I was like, so like, I don't know, like a young kid, but it ended
Yeah.
up being fine. Like, here I am and it worked out. Like, I love my journey. And then I realized pretty quickly, I'm like, oh, actually, I started booking like leads in indie films. And then I was like, "Oh, actually, you really do need to be like studying and like training." So I went to Lee Strasberg for I only went for like maybe like a semester. And then I studied at T Schreiber Studios, which I stayed for a really long time. I really liked my training there. I loved all my teachers. Um And then I studied with Deborah Headwall, and she's amazing. She had like a master like advanced scene study class in New York City, and she was also, I think she taught the grad program at Mason Gross at Rutgers, if you're familiar.
Yeah.
And then took improv classes at the Pit, and then most recently I'm doing UCB improv.
That's
Um,
amazing.
yeah, and I took some years off just because I felt like I was like really like classed out, you know?
Yeah.
Like I was like, I don't need class anymore. Like this is enough. And then especially with the pandemic too, I just like had this sort of like, I'm not going to class. Like I don't need class anymore. Like I'm, like I have all
Yeah.
this experience. And I had like such a bad attitude about it. And then I realized more recently, I'm like, no, you always have to be learning. You
Yeah.
always, I think it's really important to always keep inspiring yourself. And like it's whenever I'm studying, I feel like really motivated. And there's this really interesting thing that happens when I'm in class. It's like then all of a sudden magically I'm starting to get like offers for projects. So I feel
Yeah.
like it's like whatever you put your attention on, like you sort of attract back into your
Totally.
life.
Totally.
But then you find your community too. Like at T Schreiber Studios, I worked with a group of girls who would just like write me in their like short films and their plays. And I worked for like a whole year just like from meeting this group of people at
Yeah.
at class. So, I mean, I feel like it's really important to always be studying, being really curious. Like there's always something you can learn. There's always techniques. I had a 1 month I studied out here in LA at Ivana Chubbuck Studios. Um and it's just like really cool to be like learning different methods and like picking and choosing like what can I take from this and what would work and like what feels good, and sort of like it's kind of nice to have like that toolbox now where I can be like, okay, I'm going to take this from here, I'm going to take this from there and like make it work for me.
Yeah. Well, I think it's that hunger and that acknowledgement that you can never stop learning, like that the desire to learn. And yeah, I think many of us have that reaction where you start off going to, you're 18 or 19 or whatever, and you're just like you're ready for the next level and you haven't gotten through that first level yet. And I actually I've said this a million times, but I took a really long time to get my bachelor's. I went for a couple of years. I ended up moving to Los Angeles for a little while, and I made some short films out there with my buddy Jordan. But when I came back after a couple of years to finish up my degree, I was so into it because I had the perspective and the life experience, and I knew what I wanted to learn and what was. I mean, there's always something I shouldn't say missing, but I knew specifically the things that I coveted that I really wanted to know and understand that I didn't know yet. Whereas when you're 18, the perspective on that is a lot more blasé. But when you get a little bit older, so I think it's that experience for all of us. Um, and I find it interesting too that you were getting cast in lead roles in indie films, and then at that point you were like, actually, I want to kind of explore the different toolboxes that I can access.
Yeah. Yeah, because I wanted to be good. Like I didn't want to just like book
Yeah,
stuff. Like I wanted to do a really good job, and I
yeah,
wanted to do it more because once you get the taste, it's like, wow, this is magical. Like being on set and like just creating with a group of
nothing like
people. Like
it.
it's so amazing. And I wanted to just keep doing it. And I'm like, but I want to be good. I don't
Yeah.
want to be like, I don't know, as best as I could be, I guess,
No,
for
for
my own
sure, for
self.
sure. Well, it's self-improvement, and it's also, like you said, it's acknowledging the desire to learn and the desire to constantly be better, because everyone can always work on themselves and work on whatever profession that they have. But yeah, I think that's really admirable. Um, so with school and a lot of the different classes that you've taken, we've touched on this a little bit, but like how do you develop as a performer? Is it, especially early on, is it studying performances that you admire? Is it getting into a certain technique? Like, what was kind of the formative part and then going forward?
Mm. Feel like I'm trying to think when I was younger. I feel so okay, my method when I was younger was like you have to experience pain and suffering to do a good job as an actor.
Yeah.
And I feel like some of the teachers that I had studied with, and I won't name names or anything or like where they were, but like I studied with some really great instructors and teachers that were like masters, and they were from the era of like studying under like the abusive acting teacher.
Yeah.
And they had a little bit of that in them, and
Yeah.
so it was like And I had a lot of teachers. I don't know if we can like swear on here. I should have
Oh,
asked
swear
this.
away.
Okay. Like I remember this one teacher, and it wasn't towards me, but it was towards like other actors. She'd be like, "What the fuck are you doing? Like
Yeah.
this sucks. Like get." And it was a horror. Like it was like
That's
terrifying. So
terrifying.
like
Yeah.
I would have such anxiety, and I just thought that, and that was like really my first. Besides, like you or I, like was not like that at all. But like going into like studying in New York City, like that was like some of my first earliest memories of like studying, and I was
Wow.
like, oh, so this is just the way it
This is
is,
it.
you
This
know?
is how, yeah, yeah.
And like
Gotta get used to this.
yeah, and like method, like the method, and like really kind of like re-traumatizing yourself, like
Yeah.
sense memory, and like it, which it all has a great place, but I feel like if you're not taught how to like sort of get yourself out of that, it could be really re-traumatizing.
Yeah, totally.
So I kind of had that like outlook, and I remember like doing some plays and kind of putting myself in this just reliving of like awful things that have like happened to my life,
Yeah.
and just suffering, and like thinking like, okay, this is what I need to do in order to do a good job. And then like the entire rest of the day just like bumbling through life, just feeling like shit, like
Yeah.
not being able to like get out of that like headspace, and just like it was a really really unhealthy. And I think there's a lot of people that still believe that like I hate to think that like people feel like that's what's necessary in order to do a good job as an actor. So I think that's where I kind of started off from. And then as I started like meditating and doing like self-care and really focusing on like mental health and sort of healing from a lot of that, I'm like, oh, you don't need to like put yourself through that in order
Suffer.
to yeah,
Yeah.
in order to like do a the best job that I can do. So I think then I started at T Schreiber, I started to like sort of unwind all of that, and really just focusing on like, meditating even before a performance can be
Yeah.
like like the difference of everything. So like I've really like kind of took all that and like sort of put it all together, and like now it's like really making sure like if I'm going, and actually I learned at Ivana Chubik, there's like this whole system that she goes through. It's like these 12 steps. It's like for some reason now it doesn't feel like when I have to go to a certain place, it kind of like I can get out of it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't stay with me or linger with me like throughout the entire day, if that makes sense. I hope I
Totally
answered your
makes sense.
question.
No, you are answering my
Okay.
question. So I'm not one to, I can't speak to this because I'm not a trained actor, but I do find it interesting, the discourse and conversation regarding method, especially over the last couple of years. And I know that some very prominent people have opined very publicly about the pros and cons of it. But I'm really glad to hear that, and I'm really glad to hear, and by glad to hear that I mean realizing that you don't have to make yourself suffer. Because one of the things that I think about a lot and we talk about a lot is mental health and our approach, whether it be writing, whether it be filmmaking, whether it be acting, and the things that we put ourselves through. And yeah, for a lot of people that are either have gone through method or have been taught that at some point, and then kind of, I don't want to say come out of it like it's a disease, but I think there's a lot to be said for not for learning that you don't necessarily have to put yourself genuinely through hell, to
Yeah.
capture a performance or to get into a certain headspace, and I'm really glad you touched on that it's an important thing, I think, especially for people up and coming, to learn that you don't have to necessarily access your own actual trauma. Again, I can't speak to this as an actor, but um, there's a lot of discourse around it, so it's nice to hear that your experience became more positive.
Yeah. And like, yeah. And I feel like, you hear all these stories about like just people being dicks to like people on set,
Well,
like,
that's another thing
and
is,
it's like, you don't need to do, like, why do you need to do that? I don't
yeah.
understand.
Yeah, it's
But
very weird, and I think for some people, it is a way to it's a curtain that people hide behind just so they can be a dick.
mm.
I don't necessarily think that it might enhance their own performance. Um, and also, it kind of presupposes that you can't imagine being that dick. You don't have to be that. I don't know. It's a very
Yeah.
bizarre. thing.
I agree with that statement of that, but also I don't want us to feel like I'm not like, trying to be sort of negative towards like people that like want to try this out. So like I
No,
don't want that to come across, but
no,
like for
not at
me,
all. No, and same here. I'm not anti any any form of acting or anything like that. I do get concerned just about kind of the overall aura of it sometimes. That
yeah,
the damage that people can do to themselves.
yeah, I just feel like you don't need to hurt yourself in order to create.
Yes, exactly,
Is the
exactly.
takeaway, I
Yeah,
guess.
no, it's a good takeaway. Um, so where are you? We talk a lot about location as well on the show. Kind of, do you need to be in this place or that place? So you're in LA now, but where are you from originally? And I know you spent time in New York as well. And do you feel like, especially in 2023, location is absolutely paramount to success?
Yeah, I grew up in Northwest New Jersey, and I lived in Jersey City and then in Manhattan on the Lower East Side for about 14, 15 years. I think I was there. And
Okay,
now I've been in LA for about a little over 2 years now.
nice.
Now it absolutely doesn't matter. As
Yeah,
you know, it's like we're in this whole wonderful space of self-taping,
yeah.
and so which is really cool because you can literally be wherever you want in the world. I mean, as long as you have the means to like sort of get
To
yourself to
get
where
there,
you need
yeah.
to go if you have like a callback or whatever, but a
Sure.
lot of it's done online, which is really amazing actually. I remember being like so disgruntled about it when it first became like the thing.
Yeah.
And the realization of like, oh, this is just how things are gonna go now. And I'm sorry, I'm like trying to fend off this cat because she's gonna like knock over the mic and Odette, come on, please. I love you, um,
The
but
camera
now
just falls over, I'll know that it was the cat's fault.
it will be her, Odette. Yes. um, it's now I've realized what a real blessing it is because I remember younger like not being able to like or not wanting to go on vacation even. I'm like, no, I have to be here in the
Wow.
city.
Yeah.
And that was before self taste because you had to be there or else you're just not gonna get it.
Yeah.
And I remember and that was also like really healthy too, because it's like you're just holding on, like not going anywhere, not allowing yourself to experience travel and joy
Yeah.
because you're afraid you might miss something
Those
that may
pesky
or
life
not.
experiences.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think now to answer your question, short answer, you can be kind of wherever, which is
Yeah.
really awesome.
Yeah. Hey, I love hearing that you enjoy the self-tape process because that's something that I always ask too is you've kind of answered it, but I mean, what are kind of the differences? Are there any differences for you in terms of preparing for self-tape versus in person? And is there one you prefer apart from the convenience? Because I know being in a room is a lot different than being at home and putting something on tape.
Yeah, I feel like I I hate to say this, but like to be honest, I feel like with the self tapes because like you can get a lot in a week, and I
Yeah.
feel like I've gotten a little more like I don't want to say lazy, but it's like it's kind of like you're trying your best to like pump them out.
Yeah.
And maybe I just got to be better about myself, like pick kind of like really like being like setting that boundary of like, okay, I'm not gonna do all of these. Maybe I'm just gonna pick like the ones that I like really
Yeah.
feel like that resonate with me. But in person ones, I felt like I would like go through this whole thing where I would do a vocal warm up at home. I'm just like putting this together now. It's pretty funny. I would do like a vocal warm up at home. I would like stretch my body and I would like take the train and I would meditate or I would do whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, I don't really do all that anymore because it's like maybe it's just so convenient now that it's easy to just like slap up like my little setup real quick and just like kind of pop on
Yeah.
the sound tape. Um but yeah, so I feel like it's definitely different now because I especially like I guess if you're in person, it's a little more I don't know, like you're giving a live performance to like a couple people, so it's like you
Yeah.
got to be on your A game kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which I should probably take that sort of perspective and mentality and like apply it to the self taping too. So I'm glad we're talking about this. Thanks for this epiphany. But yeah, like I feel like it's definitely gotten a little more like relaxed. So, which is
Yeah.
not a good thing. I'm not saying it's a
Well,
good
no, I
thing.
totally get what you're saying. I mean, I think the idea of it being like more relaxed insofar as maybe the stress level isn't as high, which I would also argue is a good thing. Being on the other side of the table, I have to say, like, I hate like the auditioning process. I always have so much sympathy for people coming into the room because everyone should know this, but I mean, it's an impossible. First of all, you're never going to encapsulate, no matter how good you are in the room, you're not going to. There are limitations to walking into a room with like four people creepily sitting at a table, and then I don't know, like honestly, personally, now down the line of auditioning, I'm very much into in person. I think it's very important, especially watching people interact. But
Mm.
early on, it's all video because you're not only allowing the performer, in my opinion, just a little more leeway because they kind of have the option to do A, B, or C, and there isn't that immense pressure of being in a room. But I don't think the being in a room thing showcases all that much because there's so many variables, like, and it's not for me to say, you can correct me on this, but if you got a tape to do by Friday and Tuesday's just a really off day, instead of doing it Tuesday, you can do it Wednesday. Whereas if it's the in-person thing and you're having that bad day and you spilt the coffee and you're going through A, B, and C, and then you got to be in a room, like, I know that's part of it, but I kind of don't mind removing that part of it and treating
Mm.
actors more like humanely and giving them time to, I don't know. Being in a room, I think is very, it's tough.
Yeah. I think there is a part, and I appreciate that, so thank you.
Oh, of course.
On behalf of all actors. um, I think there was something that I do miss in being in the room is that like that energy, of
Yeah.
course. You don't get that obviously, that face to face. And I do feel like there was times where like because I was so nervous,
Yeah.
there was something that came out of that in my performance where I
Sure.
like book things. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess you could it's like I don't know. I don't know what it's like there's pros and cons to both, I guess. So,
Sure.
yeah. I did have a couple in-person auditions out here. I had like 3. Um and they were weird. It was like awkward and weird
Yeah.
because I was like, "Oh, I don't cuz I haven't done it and so I mean it's been like
You
what
mean
when did
relatively recently, right? Like
Yeah,
after the
yeah.
pandemic. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
No, no,
The
not at
last
all.
like 5 6 months. And I just remember being like so and I remember one time it was just like me and this guy and I was like I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. And it was like a really an emotional, like really, really an emotional thing. It was just like, I don't know. So I kind of go back and forth with it
Yeah. Well, it's such an
whenever.
inherently I mean, it's a bizarre set of circumstances to begin with. And one thing I want to say too, and this is especially for anyone on the other side of the table, is make make it non-weird as much as you can. Like I personally will try to just be very conversational and be very kind of chirpy early on and like get to know the person a little bit, even if it's a very self-contained, usually it's like 5 or 10 minutes, but like, I try to be amenable because I try to put myself in you're walking into a room, you don't know who's going to be in the room, you don't know what they look like, meaning like, do they look angry? Are they tired? Is one of them asleep in the corner? Like, which no one should be, but I'm just saying you don't know what you're walking into. So
Yeah.
try to make it a warm environment, because I've heard so many stories of people going into auditions and it's just weird. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be that weird.
Yeah. I like think like that's I now that you're saying that I just remembered like I like to when I go into audition room, like I want to know people's names. Like I want to
Yeah.
know, like I want to talk for like even just a second. Like, who are you? Like,
Yeah.
what's your which one are you?
Yeah.
How are you? How's your day? And I remember like the last few ones that I went to in person in LA and they were like right into it. No like sense of and I thought it would be so different because we have all missed, being in the
Yeah.
room and being
Kind of a
in
joyous
person.
reunion.
Yeah, and it like wasn't like that. And I remember being like really disappointed. I'm like, oh, okay. Like you don't even want to know who I am or okay.
Yeah, that's
Like
so good. It's so unfortunate. It's so like creepy. Yeah, honestly, like every time we do auditions, and anyone can call me out on this, but I'm pretty sure like every time someone comes into the room, I introduce myself, I shake hands, and everyone, whoever's in the room, introduce themselves, and then we get to it for that
yeah.
exact reason. It's just you go into a room and you don't know anyone, no one knows you. It's weird. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And like
don't do
no
that,
other
everybody.
interview or no other like situation would you be like not doing
Go.
that. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like you'd be
totally.
shaking hands. You'd be I don't know why it's like that. But I can attest, like I had the greatest time auditioning with you.
Oh, thank
back.
you.
Yeah, and I remember being
Thank
like
you.
our mutual friends being there and being like, oh my God. Like, so it was really joyful and I enjoyed it and I walked away from it feeling like really good. So
That's very kind of you to say. And
it's true.
well, thank you. I don't really take credit. I have an amazing group of people that I work with. And we kind of keep each other humble, but thank you for saying that. So let's talk a little bit about representation, because that's kind of the big thing, no matter whether it's an actor, a filmmaker, or anyone in the film industry. That's always like one of the big things. Um, so for how much of your career have you had representation, whether it's a manager, whether it's an agent? Um, and what are your feelings on it? Just because it's different for everybody, especially, you're in New York now, you're in LA. Yeah, give me the dish on that.
Oh God. This is such like a weird, I just feel like, oh,
As much as you want to. I know
no,
it's a very,
yeah,
yeah.
totally. I just don't want to like, and like throw anyone. I feel like okay, let's focus. I like for most of my career, I've not had representation.
Okay.
And and when I did, okay, so I had one agent when I first starting out. She was down in Philly and she was amazing. Her name is Ro, and she actually booked me on a few industrials and she was really cool. And I was going back and forth to Hiri casting, which they were doing like all these things. And I booked Neighbor with America Campbell and or not. Oh, that's her name now actually, because she did get married to Christian Campbell, who's Nev Campbell's brother actually.
Yeah.
So I did book that through her, and I'm always so and like just incredibly grateful for her for that. And then I had a couple managers here and there that I didn't hear from ever.
Yeah.
So it was like really frustrating and like especially younger, like I didn't realize, like I thought like, okay, once you have an agent or representation, like you don't have to, you don't have to do anything anymore. You can just sit back. But I learned pretty quickly, like that I had to still be kind of doing my own work and
Yeah.
sort of just self-submitting. So like I still had actors access and casting networks and backstage and Mandy. I don't even know if that like Mandy's a thing anymore, but it
I
or,
think it is. I think it
yeah,
is.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would just constantly be every day, and a lot of the things I've done were from my own self submission. So although it's been like kind of a bummer because it's like, yeah, I would, would love, and now I do have an agent in Hawaii, which is like really amazing because they're submitting to like I know it's really weird.
No, that's amazing though.
Well, now what's really cool because if you're remote, you just
Yeah.
send tapes. Like I was saying, we can be literally anywhere. And so they're submitting me to like the Magnum PI shows out there and the NCIS Hawaii.
Yeah.
And it feels so good to have someone like kind of on your team, like also helping you out. But for a lot of my life, like I really didn't have that. And I remember just being so frustrated and really letting it sort of like, I don't know, mean like that for whatever reason, like I wasn't good enough. Or like it really sort of like uh would fuel into the sort of feeling like unworthiness and feeling like, oh, I'm never gonna get, anything big without an agent. And and that was like a real downer for a really for a few years of my life. And then I just kind of started to realize, like, I booked so many really amazing things, and then I've gotten like so many referrals to projects through, other people. Like I can't tell you how many times where I've been on set and like the PA was like help, or we helped each other out, or like we bonded in some way on that set, and they ended up like being a director on like a commercial, and then they called me in to be in
Yeah.
that. Or like the second assistant camera operator was doing a film and was the director like a year from there, a year from that, and like brought me on as like the lead in their short film. Like there's just so many
Yeah.
cool things where that sort of happens. So I started to really kind of let that go. I do think on some level, like, if you want to book like big TV role and film roles, like you do have to have someone helping you get into the room and
Sure.
like building those relationships. But I think now it's really cool because you can kind of network on your own. And now through like there's so much access to like, casting director workshops and just like kind of forming like relationships even like through social media, through like filmmakers that you like, and like over the time, like building like relationships in your own way. So um I think what's important to know is that like you don't have to feel like limited, I guess. There's this
Yeah.
awesome teacher. She's an actor. She's an amazing teacher too. Her name is Wendy Braun, and um she has this awesome quote. I don't know if it was like she created this quote or like where it came from, but that's how I found out about it, where it's like, I am the exception to the rule in this business. So anytime I
Yeah.
feel like self-doubt or feelings of like, oh, I'm not, getting an agent. Like I had so many referrals to different agencies from so many different friends and filmmakers, which is
Yeah.
like literally amazing. Like I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of that doesn't like really happen, so like
Yeah.
even to that, like that speaks a lot, like these people believe in me and they're literally willingly giving my stuff to like their agent or manager or whatever.
Which
And
is
I'm like,
huge.
yeah, and I'm like, okay, like I'm really grateful for that. And like I didn't book Rent a Pal with an agent. I booked that on my own.
Wow.
And so it's like, and you never, and that had a theatrical release, you know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
just never know what's going to happen. So like not being limited to like that like frame of thinking like I need to have an agent to like survive or like to make it. Like you don't, and I keep
Yeah.
saying that like anytime I have that like self-doubt sort of chirping in my ear, I'm like, I'm the exception to every rule in this business. And
Yeah.
it kind of like puts it back to like another perspective, like, okay, like whatever's gonna happen, whatever is meant for me is like gonna happen, regardless of having an agent or not,
Yeah.
or regardless of anything, really.
Yeah.
I
No,
hope
that's a
I
no, you did. That's a beautiful way to
okay.
look at it. And I think it highlights two really important things. One is that I think the idea of getting an agent and a manager, or a manager, I should say, and then kind of thinking, well, like your own kind of work is done. Like they're going to go out and find and get you into the rooms that you need to get into. And I love the fact that you were like, well, no, I'm also going to continue trying to find things on my own at the same time. And then,
Mm,
like you said, the vast majority or a lot of the things that you got was because of your own work and your own putting yourself out there. Um, and then number two, just like in terms of persevering, yeah, I love that mantra, and I think it's really wonderful. But like tying your industrial self-worth or your career self-worth to whether you have a manager or not, or whether you have an agent or not, um, is a mistake, I think. And I love to hear kind of your journey, and it's also something that you learn. It's something that you have to go through. Like with most things, you have to have your personal experience of it before you can form an opinion on it, but like really get the perspective that will kind of dictate the path forward in your career. Um, so it sounds like overall it was a positive experience. And I love that you got Rent-A-Pal on your own. That's like,
yeah, yeah, it's cool. I think it's a cool story that people like to hear because they're like, what, really? Like I've
yeah.
had a lot of actors friends reach out after that and they're like, can we just talk? Like can I hear like what did you do,
How do
how
you
did
work
you?
this magic of getting, yeah,
Yeah. And I think it's that. I really think it's just like, just like knowing like, okay, like whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen and doesn't like necessarily have to be like dictated by like, I don't know. I remember like me like thinking like I need, and not the saying like agents and managers are wonderful. Like they
oh,
work
for
really
sure,
hard
for sure,
and
yeah,
they,
yeah,
so I don't want anyone to think that I'm like, you
not at
don't
all,
need, like you do at a certain
yeah,
point. I think you really, but it's not going to determine whether or not like you reach success, whatever that means for you.
yeah, no,
Um,
totally, totally. In terms of preparing, so we talked a little bit about process, but in terms of preparing for a role, and you use one as an example or just in general, what's your process of preparing for the role, breaking down the character, backstory? Um, and I'm sure it's different from role to role, but kind of what's the general process for you?
like freaking out at first.
All
Like
good
getting
things are preceded by a good freak out. Don't worry.
like getting the role, like, how am I gonna do this? Like, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna like, having anxiety about it. And then like started putting like the lid on that. And I'm like, okay, let's take a
All
step
right, let's
back.
move on.
Um, and then kind of just like read the script a bunch of times and um kind of like let my imagination sort of wander, and then I start to kind of think about, oh well, I've experienced this in my real life, I understand what that feels like, and just trying to kind of like meditate and daydream as this character, learning the lines, obviously. um, and I think like once I have the lines down is like really when I start to um, like I don't know, it's kind of like inspiration will kind of come. I'm sure you know, or like any artist, like you'll get like these little
Oh
pops
yeah.
of inspiration that kind of come through when you're just like doing the dishes or like cleaning, you know?
Oh, it's
Um,
always at the weirdest times.
yeah.
For me, often it's behind the wheel of a car. It doesn't
Oh,
matter what I'm doing.
yes.
I could be going to the grocery store. It doesn't matter. Like for some reason, my brain like starts working creatively in these very bizarre times. But I totally get that.
That's so I think there is something to that actually. It's kind of like when you're in this like flow like state, that's like when your brain is sort of like focusing on just like this like
Yeah,
mindful task of being in the present. So it's like, oh, then the inspiration is able to come through.
yeah,
So that's really cool. And I actually really do love like actually even this last audition that I had, I remember like doing my lines out loud while I'm like putting the dishes away or like cleaning.
yeah.
And like there's some sort of freedom that comes with that that's really cool. And you kind of get like these ideas that like come through. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Cool. I never thought about it like that. And then like if it's something like with Rent a Pal, I actually worked with a coach, Pam Scott. She's actually Julia Gardner's personal coach too. She's
Oh
really
wow.
amazing. Yeah. And she worked with me on that. She's like, why don't you I like to be really prepared. So like whatever it takes is like what I'm gonna do. So like
Yeah,
I worked with her a couple sessions and for this dating tape video, she was like, make one.
yeah,
And I just thought that was such like a genius thing. That I'm like, why didn't I think of that? But I'm like, it's so nice to have like collaboration from other people because you
yeah.
can just get so much from other people.
Totally.
And she was like, make your own dating tape as you and then as the character. And so I did that and I thought that was it was so cool. And then
That's
like when
such a
I
good
was there,
idea. Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, what, so that was really neat. And then like my role was a caretaker and she works, I think she's a hospice worker. So I really wanted to work with like elderly, seniors. And so I signed up for it was like helping seniors with technology. So I went to this library and I helped this lady, Drora. If you're out there listening, I love you so much. I like always wonder where she is and I hope she's okay. She was just like the loveliest being. It was such a really great experience too, even just like not even for the film, but just like for the
Just
soul. Like,
doing it. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, she just was like so magical and inspiring. And then I was, helping someone always makes us feel good. So
yeah. Totally.
like I think I try to do whatever it is I can. Like if I haven't had the experience, like I gotta go do it. Like I
Yeah.
gotta seek it out so that like
Amazing.
everything that I say is truthful and like actually is truthful for me as like
Yeah.
Amy. Um yeah. And then I'll like when I'll do my lines on like the treadmill and like I'll kind of do these running things where I'll be running or doing some sort of like physical movement where I'm sort of saying the line, but then also saying like what it is I really want or like saying
Yeah.
intentions like out loud. And that's really helpful for me too. I'm trying to think. And visualization, like meditation is obviously I keep talking about it. So like it's
Yeah.
meditation is like a huge part of like
Yeah.
um where I go. And like working on self-worth and confidence too, like through meditation, I feel like that's like half the battle. So I
Yeah.
remember like showing up a lot of times like on set and just being like feeling so insecure and like and not that like those don't pop in every once in a while
No, of
too, but it's like
course.
I know how to like sort of like rewire that now or like sort of grab it before it like sort of I go down like the rabbit hole of like feeling unworthy or feeling like oh I don't belong here, like
Yeah.
what is that what is that what is that thing what is that term when you like it's like really escaping my mind where imposter syndrome.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I had that a lot like growing up and now I like know how to like kind of grab it before it gets out of control. And I feel
Yeah.
like that's half the battle of being an actor. It's like,
I think that's half the battle of being a human.
yeah, it's true.
Like no,
Good point.
that's a really good way to put it. But I think whether it's meditation or whatever the way um that we use to kind of self-assess and work on ourselves. But I think in any industry, in any walk of life, but I think I'll say particularly in film, the amount of rejection and the amount, everyone's journey is so different to getting wherever um, we define success as for ourselves. And I think it's such a rocky road, and it's a whole industry built on no, it's a whole kind of impossible industry built on rejection. Uh, and so I think the more that we're in touch with ourselves and how we react to things, and then how we self-assess, um, is really important. So it's lovely to hear that you kind of have those tools and you've developed those tools. Like you said, whether you're in a room or whether you're on set, to really help you to cope and also just to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the things that like I wish I had learned earlier growing up.
Yeah.
Like through like acting school, it's like almost like a tearing down of like the spirit
Yeah. You mean
instead
you
of
mean
like
instead of someone yelling, "What the fuck are you
eh,
doing?" Maybe they could
yeah,
have given you some sort of positive affirmation.
right.
Yeah.
um yeah, yeah, I think that's half the battle.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. In terms of, I love talking, and this question is kind of catered for filmmakers, or your answer is, but in terms of working with a director, um, what qualities do you look for, or I suppose I should say hope for, in a director, and that relationship between actor and director in terms of their instruction, in terms of the ideas they bring to the table? But what are kind of some of the qualities that you hope to find in the directors that you work with?
I feel like I'm really lucky with all the directors that I've worked with. They all had like this wanting to collaborate, but also kind of taking a step back and not being like controlling
Yeah,
and not being a little overbearing or like, there was always like this really beautiful boundary, I feel, of like give and take, of like,
sure.
what are your thoughts on this? And what do and like really, it's freedom, I think.
Yeah,
Um, I, I worked with one director, and it was just like a really awful, awful experience.
really.
Um, yeah, and I'm like scared to like say like trying to
You can
figure
say
out
as
how to
much as
say
you want.
say this
Yeah.
tactfully. I just feel like the bully director is just like not my style.
Yeah.
Like the bully sort of self tearing down of self, like like that is not. I'm sure that's not anyone's style.
Yeah, I would imagine so. But you do
Yes.
you do run into those people quite often, actually.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm really like lucky because I've only had one in
Yeah.
like the 20 years that I've been acting. I've only had one, and I'm like, it really messed me up, and it was really upsetting. And I was just like, I don't understand, like
Yeah.
how like someone could be just so like nasty to people, and like not even just to me, just to like everyone, and like
Yeah.
everyone allowing it to happen. And I'm like, I was just mind blown. So I feel yeah, and I like John was really great. John Stevenson
Yeah.
in Rent a Pal. He like we had like one meeting, I feel like beforehand through Skype because they were out in Denver actually, and I was in Jersey City. We had a meeting or maybe two and just kind of talked about, Lisa's character and um but there was a sense of like joyfulness on set and freedom
Yeah.
and kind of just like giving a little bit of like direction and like encouragement and like let me sort of just play. And I just feel like that's really amazing.
Yeah. That is
Um
amazing. And I
yeah.
I just to say, and again, I'm very redundant over the course of the show, but the idea of like a toxic or just an unpleasant work environment, you'll never ever get the best work out of anyone ever that way. It doesn't matter. I don't care what anyone says. Having a scared group of people or an unhappy group of people that hate your guts. I'm saying as a filmmaker, or if you have producers on set, um, showing disrespect to anybody, it's I don't get it. I don't get the idea, the aura of not aura, but the image of, the screaming tyrant director, or producers on set. It's just, you'll never
Yeah.
get the best work from anybody that way.
Yeah, I don't either. And I think it's sort of like I'm like, there's some sort of personality just I mean, I don't know. Like
Well,
that's
it's
a whole other
infantile.
com
It's
it's a whole
infantile.
other conversation, but
Yeah, low life behavior, in my opinion. Because
yeah,
you wouldn't do that anywhere else, or maybe the people that would do it on a set would do it elsewhere. But
I
um,
think this guy lives his life.
that way.
this way. Like there's no way. Like there's some sort of like something missing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Um,
it's totally.
and God bless him. You know, like I feel like to have to like feel like you need to treat people like that or
Yeah,
live through life. That's sad, and clearly
it is.
he's probably been through something that have made him that way. You know, so
Yeah.
I do have like a little bit of sympathy or empathy, you know, for that person.
Sure. Sure.
However, this is like
Doesn't mean you want to be on that set.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you know, it's just incredible to me sometimes how people that behave that way or treat other people so horribly can get to a place where they're people are giving them money or they're
Yeah.
getting all these
Oh,
opportunities. I'm like,
yeah.
it's just it's a little confusing and it's
A little
interesting.
mind-boggling. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, huh, wow, you know, how did you get this far? You know, like how did you? I don't know,
Yeah.
but I
No, it's a very good point. It makes you wonder, but
yeah, I mean, I don't know. So I think yeah, not that. I don't know. I feel like
yeah.
I'm going
No,
off on a
no.
tangent. I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. One question I do have though,
Memories.
and what?
I said bad memories. My brain is like starting to contract. What were you saying?
I was just gonna say, in terms of the roles that you've had a whole variety of roles. Is there a certain type of role or even a certain type of genre that you look out for or that you really, really gravitate towards?
Yeah, like sci-fi for sure is
Going
like,
back to
oh, it's like just
yeah,
there. It's always
yeah.
gonna be there. Go
No, I
back to
love
that
it. That's great.
3-year-old. Yeah, like anytime I see a casting for sci-fi, like post-apocalyptic sort of, you know, any sort of like gritty, you know, like it's anything like The Road, you know, that movie The
Oh
Road or
yeah,
anything,
great
I'm
book
just
too.
like I need yeah, I haven't read, I should read that book
Really
actually.
good.
Thanks for
I love
saying that.
Cormac McCarthy. Yeah, yeah, no, it's a astonishing book.
Yeah, I get like such a thrill. I'm like, oh my God, please. Like, I just get like goosebumps, you know, I'm like, please, like,
Yeah,
call me in for this.
I
Let me
need
have
this.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually had some ideas of like writing, actually. I'm like, well, I guess I have two ideas actually for scripts, for screenplays that I have like yet to like actually, you
Oh,
know,
you got to do it.
do.
You got to do it. I
Yeah.
mean, even if it's, I mean, whatever form it takes or however long it takes. But I mean, you know, I always encourage people if they've got ideas, at least just have fun with outlining or throw them on it. My whole wall is littered with index cards or whatever the process is
Oh,
for you.
yeah.
Just, have fun with it. See
Yeah.
where it goes.
Yeah. So I'm like, maybe I just need to like write myself into these.
Yeah.
I have ideas. There's actually three where I have some of them though. I don't know if this happens to you, but like sometimes I get these ideas for like horror films or like sci-fi. I'm like, they're so disturbing. I'm like, whoa, like why is this coming to me? Like, please stop. Like, make it stop. And then it's like it's not good because it's like sort of stifling like any sort of like creative flow or like
Yeah.
preventing me from like kind of taking it to the next step because it's like I don't want to think about that ever again,
Yeah.
but it would make a really good movie, you know.
Well, that's the thing though. If you're reacting that way, then a lot of people are going to react that way. But I think in its own way, it's a form of therapy because you're I don't know, you're addressing horrific things, but as a lot of people say, and I agree with, I think horror is a way for people to work through their fears, whether their specific fear is addressed in the film or not. But I mean, and I think writers do the same thing, and all creatives do the same thing. It's kind of
Ah,
a therapeutic, you know, a therapeutic session of working through whether it's fear or whether it's something specific that does manifest in what you're writing, but it could be a different fear that you just work through by being scared about something else, if that makes sense.
oh, it's genius, Colin.
You're too kind. I'm
Damn
just
it.
copying what other people have said, I'm sure. But you should write it.
Oh, it's
I
so true though.
heartily
Like,
encourage it.
thank you. Yeah, you're so right. Like everything, like light bulbs just like went off when you were talking. I'm like, all right, fine. Like, I guess I just gotta do
I
it. It's
gotta
true
do it
though.
now.
Yeah, but I mean, if you think about it, like that's what I do that a lot, like just journaling, even when I have it's like a bad dream. Like I did it this
Sure.
morning. I was like, I had all these really
I'm gonna
awful
be on the new
dreams.
animal podcast, and I can't. No, I'm just kidding.
No, no. I was so excited for this. But yeah, like I'm a little
Thank you.
nervous too. I always get nervous with these things.
Oh, that's
But
normal.
I guess. I'm like, do you ever get used to it? Like, I don't know.
No, I don't. I mean, I don't know. I think everyone's different. I think everyone's I don't know, it's the idea of being on, right? So even though like you
Yeah.
and I knew each other a little bit and we've had previous interactions, it's also we're on a show that's going out to the public. So there's I think that it's just like going on a stage. Well, it's not like it's not like going on a stage. I feel much more for people going on a stage. But yeah, you got to be on. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I think that intrinsic I'm not speaking for you. I'm just saying in general, I think you know, it's a very specific thing because you're creating something that's going to then go out and people will listen to it. So I think there's this kind of mental thing that I think is just that's normal. It's totally normal.
Yeah, I guess. It's just weird. Oh, like whenever I do like red carpet, like any sort of like film festival, like interviews, like I just sound like a jackass. God, that's gonna be like online forever now. Like literally, it's like
I
gonna be
doubt it.
there.
I think because I think we all go to those places. I think we sound that way. And I got to tell you, there's been episodes where, especially like early on, not that this has been going on for 20 years, but like I just I thought it was I thought I dropped like every ball that you could possibly drop. And not saying that I didn't, but I maybe only dropped half of them because I'd listened to it back and I'm like, oh, I didn't. I don't know, because early on you get very self-conscious about am I what really quickly, there were a couple of episodes early on that I just did solo. So I would talk about different topics that I wanted to address or, you know, film related or new animal related. And I'd listen back to it, or as I'm doing it, I'm like, am I saying yeah too much? Or am I saying this word too much? Because there's no conversation. It's just me going on and on,
Mm,
much
mhm.
like I'm doing right now. But it's just funny. So, but then you kind of corral those thoughts and kind of learn from them, you know?
Yeah. I don't know if you saw the new oh shoot, what is his name? I'm so tired today. This is awful. He's a comedian and he went to rehab.
John Mulaney?
Yes, did you see his
I
new?
did not. I read about it. I've not seen it yet.
So I'm so grateful I watched it last night because he was talking about he had the worst interview of his life and he was like on drugs and he doesn't even remember it, but he read it. I don't know if I'm like spoiling this for you. I'm sorry.
No, no, no.
I
Please,
don't
please. Go ahead.
but it was like the worst, funniest interview with GQ. And I was like afterwards, like, I'm so glad I watched that because no matter what I do, no matter what I say, it's never gonna be that bad. So
You
it
can
just gave me
always
a lot of
pull on John Mulaney's experience
yeah.
in that interview.
Yeah. Thanks,
Yeah.
John Mulaney. I know
Yeah.
you'll never see this, but thank you.
um, so one last question that I have, and I ask this to everybody, is if you could give like your 18-year-old self one bit of advice, and it could be film related, it doesn't have to be, could be life related, but what bit of advice would you give?
You are worthy. I would just say that to her. You are worthy of everything.
Yeah.
Of love, of love, you know, a happy life, of success, of money, you know, whatever it is. I feel like I was having such a hard time back then. And
Yeah.
also knowing like it's all going to work out, you know, like all those fears that you have, like it's all going to be okay. And it might not like come to you in the ways that you want it to or at the speed that you want it to. But if you just don't give up, like eventually it's gonna happen. I feel like
Beautifully put.
emotional right now.
No, that was beautifully put and a beautiful thing to say.
I feel like in
And
this
it
business, oh
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I'll just say an advice that I think everyone should heed.
Yeah, I feel like if you put yourself out there and you just keep trying and learning and like filling yourself up with like other things that also bring you joy, like you're gonna get it. You're gonna make it. It's just
Yeah.
like a matter of time and
Yeah.
just to be patient, which is really hard, you know, but
It's very
like,
hard.
you know, you're gonna get it eventually, you know, even if it's like another 20 years or
Yeah.
40 years, like there's no
And
way it's not gonna happen for you.
everybody's journey is different and it's
Yeah,
really important to remember that, you know, because people we constantly compare ourselves and it's when we free ourselves of comparing ourselves to others that I think we're truly free to go on our own way.
totally. Yeah. And I remember feeling like a lot of like, you know, a lot of people that I've studied with in class are now like big time. Like they're
Yeah.
doing really, really good. And like it's sometimes really hard in the past to like, oh sorry, someone's like knocking on my door.
This is a great creepy way to end the show.
Oh my
Is
gosh,
someone just
should
banging
we
on your
end it?
door? No, no,
uh
I
hey,
can cut this
hang
out.
on.
I really think we should keep this in. Do you need to
Okay.
go answer that?
I don't know. I think it's a maintenance person,
Okay.
but I don't think I need to. Uh,
Well, we'll end it anyway because I don't know. I don't know if the maintenance person's trying
it's
to get in. Amy, it was a pleasure having you on the show. If it's not the maintenance man, tell them to go away. If it is the maintenance man, tell them to
well,
come in and be quick about it.
yeah.
But thank you so much for being on, and you're always welcome onto the show.
Thank you so much, Colin. I'm so grateful. You're just so wonderful. This was like really a joyful, like super inspiring. Like you're inspiring, and I really hope that like we get to work together in the future. Like I have a feeling that maybe we will in some capacity.
I think we will too. And the pleasure
Yeah.
was all mine. Thank you very much for saying that. It was such a pleasure having you on. And thanks for
Yeah.
sharing your insight and your journey. And we'll definitely have you on again soon.
Yeah. And thanks for asking like the best questions I think I've ever had, like ever. They really are good. I
Thank
was
you.
telling my fiance before we started, I was like, these are really good questions.
Thank you.
I'm
No, that's
excited
so
about
kind of
them.
you. No, I thank you. I mean, I really try to gear it towards things that are instructional and that people will really take something away from. I kind of structure it like, what would I want to know as a listener? Or like, what have I not learned or might not have heard, about and someone's specific opinion. So thank you, Amy. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. We'll
Yeah.
talk soon.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
And let me